Be mindful of what you say. Be sincere when you pray. Today could be your last day. Bear each other no malice. Greed and faith can coexist in the same heart.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to another episode of Gems of the Heart, where we looking into the names and attributes of Allah as a way to purify our hearts. And if you remember, this is in a series, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will and bless our life, we'll go into more details, not just in the names and attributes of Allah. This is part of matters of belief. How the matters of belief, how our aqidah, our creed would purify our hearts. Purifying our hearts is a duty. It's something that is crucial for a believer. Something that nobody can ever be admitted to the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the paradise, unless they have a pure heart. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَلَا تُخْزِنِي يَوْمَ يُبْعَثُونَ يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. This is the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to disgrace him in the day of resurrection, and stating the fact that only those who would come with a sound heart are the ones that would not be disgraced in the day of resurrection. So how to have a sound heart? That means it's a heart that is purified from evil things, whether it's matters of disbelief, associating partners with Allah, things that negates the proper and the sound aqidah, the sound belief, or sins or desires that is opposing to the revelation from Allah, and so on and so forth. So we're still in the first pillar of Al-Iman and how that should affect our hearts. And we talked about the rububiyyah of Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Rabb, the Lord of the Alameen, and that He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one to be worshipped. And we talked about this and how a shirk, associating partners with Allah, would negate this purification. And of course this is the sin that is non-forgivable if a person dies with it, which is associating partners with Allah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive that someone would associate partners with Him, and He forgives anything other than that if a person dies with it. And we've been talking about the names and attributes of Allah. Many of the names and attributes of Allah we talked about, and this is one of the very important means for purification of the heart. Really, the Quran is the source. The Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Quran is the cure to our hearts, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in the Quran. وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That we bring down in the Quran what's cure and mercy for the believers. So the Quran is the cure. The Quran is the mean of purification and elevating oneself and purifying ourselves. And we got to know the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. This is something that we should focus on when we are reciting the Quran. The Quran takes us from many different subjects and stories and rulings and things of that nature. But when a person is focused on to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like imagine you start the Quran from the beginning to the end, searching or looking for one thing, and that is to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way that we get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by looking at His names and attributes, how it's mentioned in the Quran, in the context of the verses of the Quran. This is something that definitely purifies the hearts, gives us the proper understanding of this life and what the purpose of it and how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That perfects the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hearts, makes the person have the true fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hope for the rewards from Allah. Person will find himself establishing the acts of worship the way it ought to be. Many people, they do not know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even among Muslims. They may be making the salah, giving the zakah, fasting Ramadan and so on, but they did not spend the time to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, they would do physically actions, but their hearts is empty. The hearts can be easily polluted with all kinds of evil things. When a person gets to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to spend the time to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes, it's a life-changing experience, life-changing knowledge that is essential for each and every Muslim each and every human being on the face of earth. And if they know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they would worship Him alone. And since the matter is unseen to us, so the only way for us to know that is by the revelation from Allah, the wahy from Allah, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. One of these names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is mentioned in the Quran, and we talked about similar names like that, is Al-Warith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith. Al-Warith is the inheritor of all, heir, the inheritor of all. And we know that the word Al-Warith and the meaning of inheritance, and we know that there are rulings when it comes to the subject of inheritance. The meaning of it, of what does it mean to be the heir or the inheritor of all, it's the one that stays forever, is the one that is ever living after others perishes or they go away. We know that we talked about Al-Baqi, the one that is ever living, or ever staying or everlasting. We talked about Al-Hayy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ever living. But the name Al-Warith, that has to do something with someone else perished or left. And that's the same thing with heirs when a person dies and there are those who would inherit from him. So the word inheritance comes referring to those who lived after someone died. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith. That means within the word Al-Warith, it gives the meaning that everybody will vanish and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is the ever living. So He is Al-Warith, and it's a great name, has great implications to it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Maryam, verse number 40, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَرِثُ الْأَرْضَ وَمَنْ عَلَيْهَا, which means indeed we will inherit the earth. Inna nahnu narithu al-ard. Narith, that's the verb of it. That means we will inherit the earth. وَمَنْ عَلَيْهَا, and whoever is on it. وَإِلَيْنَا يُرْجَعُونَ, and everybody shall be returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a matter of belief, and that means narithu al-ard, that means the ard or the earth is been occupied now by the human beings, those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And even though you might have some ownership to the land that you live in or the wealth that you have, this is a limited ownership. It's not in the absolute sense, because everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things. As one of the Bedouins, and he was a very wise person, when someone asked him, who's that? He had a flock of sheep, and he was asked who this flock of sheep belongs to. He said, it's belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's in my hand. He said, Lillah fi yadi. He has ownership to it, but he said it in the real way and form. He said it's to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is owned by Allah, but it's in my hand. That means he has been entrusted with it. He would earn from it and he would eat and so on and gain money and so on. But then after that, when a person dies, everything is left to those who come after him, and so on, and everything at the end returns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to have this right perception, to have the proper belief that no matter how long you live on the face of earth, who's the one that is going to inherit everything that you leave behind? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave it to you from the first instant, from the very beginning. You did not have it from yourself, it's all from Allah, because everything is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Hijr, verse number 23, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّا لَنَحْنُ نُحْيِي وَنُمِيتُ وَنَحْنُ الْوَارِثُونَ, that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives life and death. وَنَحْنُ الْوَارِثُونَ, and we are the inheritors. We are the inheritor. Who's the one that is the inheritor of all things? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course this brings so much great meanings in the heart that a person again would value what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala values. When a person knows and have the belief, which doesn't actually need much for a person to be convinced, because we all know that we're going to die. So therefore the one that has the real ownership of things is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as a result of that, then it's very easy to put things in the right perspective. Why then be greedy with something that you don't really own it in the absolute sense. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave it to you to entrust you with it. So why be greedy then? Why earn it from haram? Why earn it from non-permissible sources? Why would a person steal or do something impermissible or deal with riba and usury or work as a job that helps people to commit sins or to spread sins and so on? We're living at times when the matter sometimes becomes difficult for people to earn halal, to earn pure, permissible money. The heart should be settled on the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. And the inheritance or the wealth and whatever a person accumulates on the face of earth is all belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why having this greed in ourselves when we can live a goodly life knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything shall return to Him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala طيب لا يقبل إلا طيبا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pure. He only accepts what is pure. So this is one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, when we see nations before, we hear about them, we learn history. What happened to the nations before? They all returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who's the one that inherited them after they passed away, after they left? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then He give whatever on the face of earth for the generations that are present. And then it keeps going and going like this till the day of judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment, He would say to the believers about the Jannah, وَتِلْكَ الْجَنَّةُ أُورِثْتُمُوهَا بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Which means this Jannah, when the believers they enter Jannah, it's the word mentioned here, أُورِثْتُمُوهَا, that you inherited the Jannah because of what you used to do. So this is a beautiful meaning here. So that means the Jannah came to you. It was not something that you built and something that you earned, but something that is given to you. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith. He subhanahu wa ta'ala the inheritor of all. So He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that will give you the Jannah because of what you used to do. بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. So the inheritance maybe in this life happens or becomes as a result of just blood relationship. That's why if a person doesn't like his relatives, it is not still permissible to deprive them from inheritance. It's a sin. It's a major sin. There's even a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and reported in Sunan Abi Dawud and others that إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَعْمَلْ بِطَاعَةِ اللَّهِ 60 عَامًا. That a man or a woman would do the acts of obedience to Allah for 60 years. Then حتى إذا حضره الموت, when the death comes to him, he makes jawr in the wasiyah or in the inheritance. He commits injustice. He deprives this person from inheritance. He do some tricks to prevent his wife, for example, to inherit. So he would divorce her in the deathbed so that she doesn't, get any of his wealth and so on. And then he would end up entering the hellfire because of this injustice that he committed. So therefore, as a ruling, and this brings the subject of inheritance also, since we're talking about it, that if a person, for example, he has a son that disobedient to him, and he wants to deprive him from his wealth, it is not permissible unless the son is a disbeliever. For example, people that have two different religions, they cannot inherit from one another. They can be written for them something in the will, and the will is different than inheritance. The will, a person can write up to 1/3 of his wealth to give it to whoever he wish, but not those who would inherit from him normally, as mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But it's not permissible to write or to give from the will to the heirs, because they already will be given by the rulings mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But we have to make sure that we understand these rulings, especially for those who live in non-Muslim countries, where if a person dies, usually the first kin, he would take the wealth or whatever rules of the land applies, and it becomes a responsibility for the individual, if he knows or she knows that if they die, the wealth would not be distributed according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. They have to have a living will. They have to make sure and specify in it the laws of inheritance, or to go to this masjid or this Islamic center, or whatever there is, and they will be responsible for distributing the matter. And each country different with its laws, but it's a very serious matter. So people in this life, they don't have a choice when it comes to those who are already going to inherit. But when it comes to inheriting The Jannah is not based on lineage or neighbors or those who you like or anything of that nature. It's according to one's actions. So whoever wants to inherit Al-Jannah, as if we're living here in this earth where we are, and then we are returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if a person, Jannah is present today. Whoever wants it, the way to earn it and the way to receive this inheritance is by actions. بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ, by what you used to do on the face of earth. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned also in the Quran about the cities that get destroyed as a result of their evil actions and disbelief, who's the one that inherited these cities? These people, they were well established on it. They had all kinds of wealth and authorities and so on. And messengers were sent to them, and they refused to follow the messengers of Allah. And they were arrogant, and they disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them. There was no honor for them. And who's the one that inherited all of this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the inheritor of all. وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنْ قَرْيَةٍ بَطِرَتْ مَعِشَتَهَا فَتِلْكَ مَسَاكِنُهُمْ لَمْ تُسْكَنْ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا وَكُنَّا نَحْنُ الْوَارِثِينَ. Which means that كم من قرية, how many cities get destroyed because of their not being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept their dwellings and their homes as a witness against them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that inherited all of this, because He's the owner of all things. So therefore we are nothing but human beings entrusted with whatever we have to see whether are we going to fulfill the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this wealth, or are we going to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and spread corruption on the face of earth. We have to be careful with the subject of wealth. This is a very heavy subject, something that can take the person to the highest level of rewards and Jannah, or can take the person to the hellfire wal-'iyadhu billah. With regards to this wealth and these properties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us in our life, we will be asked about how did we earn it and how did we spend it. And we have rules that we have to apply according to the deen of Allah. And when a person thinks that we can spread corruption on the face of earth, and since nobody is questioning us on the face of earth, that means a person would be led free and set free? Of course not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us. And that's why we need to be careful, we need to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the inheritor of all subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is something that a person should always and still remember with the subject of inheritance. How that people, they inherit from one another. And at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the inheritor of all. And when Zakaria alayhi salam, for example, he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he would have a son, and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to leave him alone. رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْنِي فَرْدًا وَأَنْتَ خَيْرُ الْوَارِثِينَ. That means, do not leave me, do not make me alone when you are the best of al-warithin, you're the best of the inheritors. That means he wanted someone to inherit from him. It's something that is, the human beings, they have this in them, that you want to, when a person have wealth and he doesn't have offsprings, it brings sadness in the hearts, and everything is by the qadr of Allah. So for those who did not have children, did not have offsprings, it's okay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that decrees everything. But for someone that has wealth, it's something that people would seek to have children so that they would pass on this wealth to them, for that wealth not to be ruined, not to be wasted and so on. That's why, again, as we said, it's a responsibility that a person should take care of his wealth that Allah entrusted him with, even after his death, when he writes a will and the like of this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives whoever He wills, whatever He wills subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all part of the subject of inheritance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith, and it brings the human beings to be in the proper position. And we'll talk about, inshallah ta'ala, some of the implications of this, some of the effect of it in our hearts, and how we should live our life with believing in this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Warith. And when we talk about the human beings, and how human beings, they inherit from one another. An inheritance, when it comes to the rulings of the matters of the Sharia, is not that a person would have a choice in it. Nobody is permissible for him to say, I don't want to be or to receive inheritance from my father or from one's wife or one's husband or whatever there is. If a person dies, the ownership according to the ratios and the shares and so on in the religion of Islam, it's something that a person has to be given. Nobody is to say, I forgive when it comes to my share. He has to have it, and then he can give it to whoever he wills. He has to have full ownership of it, and then he can give it to whoever he wills, because the one that made these rules is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the verses in the beginning of Surah An-Nisa, with the different rules of inheritance. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says if a person dies, then he gets this, then he should get this. He should not say, no, I'll give it to the young ones or to the sons and daughters. I don't need the money. Out of good feelings and good intentions and so on. No, a person should have it, should have full ownership of it, and then he can give it to them. But not to cancel his rights from the beginning, because this is not something that is a choice or a personal choice. It's by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which shows when people apply the orders of Allah with regards to the laws of inheritance, they are basically having the proper belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith. And He subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that we make Him, the one that would distribute our wealth according to what He subhanahu wa ta'ala, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. Because it's not our wealth. And this is a very important point. And as we said, a person might enter the hellfire. A person might have worked so hard in his life, and he earned so much money. And then before he dies, well, it's his money. He can do whatever he wants to do with it. But he would write in his will that this money goes to this person and that person and so on. And he would deprive his heirs, for example, from inheritance and take the person to the hellfire. If that person believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Warith, he would see that, he would realize that all of the wealth that he collected, it's not him, it's not himself, it's not his. Why? Because it's belonged to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say to him, and that's the rulings in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you have 1/3 of your wealth, up to 1/3, you can write in your will whatever you like in it. Like you say, after you die, then this one up to 1/3. 1/3 is too much, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said. And that means if it's less, as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said 1/5 is good. You can give it to whoever you wish according to the rules of Allah, but making sure that it's not one of those who would inherit from you, normally would inherit from you. So if a person, for example, wants to give some of his wealth after he dies to a masjid, for example, or to an Islamic organization, or to a relative that he would not inherit normally from him, then what that person can do something with regards to up to 1/3 of his will. Who's the one that gave him this right? It's not because of you and it's your money and you can do whatever you want with your money. You can do whatever you want in your lifetime. But when a person is dying or after one's death, he's only can be given this freedom to write up to 1/3. And the rest of it, he has no say in it whatsoever. It's going to be distributed according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. And that's why, again, whoever believes in this, he is believing in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Al-Warith. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who benefit, of course, and we'll continue inshallah ta'ala with some of the benefits and the implications of believing in this name after the break, so stay with us inshallah.
Change your heart, Lord, change our heart.
Our guide is the Quran, our religion is Islam. 5 noble pillars upholding what is virtuous.
It's calling us to establish this hiwar, this dialogue between ourselves and between the non-Muslims, and to use hikmah. The waves are coming, you're trapped, fitna is coming everywhere. How can I get out of this fitna that I'm in? Send me the rope. Why did Allah send the Quran to you, to all of mankind? As a source of guidance, as a kitab, a blessed book to be reflected upon. And secondly, the ba'ath, the resurrection. Prepare yourself for Yawm al-Qiyamah, when you're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is Aqeedah, this is the core of Aqeedah, this is the focus of the Quran. They want these dialects and these slangs to spread so the Arabs themselves can't even understand the Quran properly. This is a choice you have to make now. Because once the angel of death comes to you and takes your soul, there's no turning back, there's no other choice.
Pilgrimage and charity. To make the testimony is the base of the faith, and the fast and the prayer, the pilgrimage and charity.
Change your heart, Lord, change our heart.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. Welcome back, and we're talking about the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Warith, the inheritor of all. And we talked about how this is one of the names of Allah that has significance, meaning to it, something that should affect our life, that everything will be perished except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the owner of all things. And as they say in this life, there's a statement among the Arabs that it will say, the same way it came to you, it's going to go to someone else. We find ourselves on the face of earth walking and talking, and things came to us. Wealth came to us, provisions came to us. And the same way, it's going to be given to someone else after we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith, is the heir, is the inheritor of all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this meaning clearly in the Quran in more than one verse, as we mentioned some of these verses before. But also one of these verses in Surah Al-Imran, verse number 180. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the inheritance of the heavens and the earth. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The inheritance, mirath, the word mirath is mentioned, the same word from the same root. And how or what is the context that this verse is mentioned? And this is where the implication of the word, the implication of believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Al-Warith, is the inheritor of all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this in the context of saying, وَمَا لَكُمْ أَلَّا تُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَلِلَّهِ مِيرَاثُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. What's the matter with you? Why don't you spend فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, for the sake of Allah, when to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the inheritance of the heavens and the earth? So one of the great implication to this belief is to spend for the sake of Allah. Because you don't own this wealth. What you're giving for the sake of Allah, what you're giving, your wealth that you have in this life, you own it, yes, versus other human beings, because Islam respects this ownership, individual ownership. But in reality, we do not own anything, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things. So therefore, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to give, then we should give, because He's the owner. Especially when it comes to the obligatory charity, zakah. And you can see how evil it is for someone to withhold the zakah, the obligation, the obligatory charity. It's an obligation, it's not a choice. So who's the owner of all this wealth? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who's the provider? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a person gives his zakah with goodness in his heart, not with difficulties or with thinking that I wish I have this money for me to use it. If it's zakah, if it's a portion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it an obligation, which is a very small portion of one's wealth, that means it is not your wealth. That means it's the wealth that belongs to someone else. And after all, the belief that should be in the heart that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered us, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered us to give all of our wealth, you work hard the entire year, then at the end of the year, imagine that the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in such a way that you have to give it all away. And then you start over again. You know, how many people would submit themselves to the orders of Allah? This is the level of submission. We talked about that before many times, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. وَلَوْ أَنَّ كَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَنِ اقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ أَوْ اخْرُجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ مَا فَعَلُوهُ إِلَّا خَيْرٌ مِنْهُمْ. If we had ordained upon them that they kill themselves or they give up their dwellings, only few would do this. But this is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to do. So therefore, when we are encouraged to give for the sake of Allah, remember the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Warith, because He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is going to inherit all things. And everything will perish. Your wealth will go away. You won't own it after you die. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said to the companions, radiallahu anhum, one day he asked them a question, and used to ﷺ teach them by asking questions, and he would wait for their answers, and then he would give them the right answer. Something for us to learn to make sure that the proper knowledge is being established in one's heart. He asked them ﷺ one day that who among you, malu warithihi, that the wealth of his heir, the one that would inherit from him, is more beloved than his own wealth. Who among you, the wealth that he will leave to his inheritors is more beloved to him than his own wealth? Of course, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they're honest. They said, of course, no one. We love our wealth more than we love the wealth for the one that we would leave behind. That means that will be gone already. So that means our wealth is more beloved to us. So the Prophet ﷺ gave them the right perception of things, is that your wealth that you love the most is what you give. This is what would stay with you. And what the wealth of your heir or your inheritor is what you leave behind, meaning that you keep the ownership of it. What does that mean? When you give for the sake of Allah before you die, this wealth you already send it to be in your account. It's going to stay with you. Will stay with you after this life. Will stay with you in the grave. Will stay with you in the hereafter. Will stay with you to make you enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to elevate you. And the rewards of it is multiplied and keeps on increasing and increasing and increasing, as the ayat and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ till the day of judgment, if you give for the sake of Allah. The wealth that you save and you accumulate and you become greedy that you don't want to give it to no one, what happens to this wealth? It goes away from you. It's not going to be your wealth anymore. It's going to be given to someone else after you die, so you won't benefit from it. Does this hadith and the like of it encourages us to give all of our wealth and not to leave anything for our heirs and our relatives and so on? Of course not. And the Prophet ﷺ mentioned also in the hadith that أَنْتَذَرْ وَرَثَتَكْ أَغْنِيَاء, that for you to live your heirs or your inheritors rich, to have some money, is better than أَنْ تَذَرْهُمْ عَالَ يَتَكَفَّفُونَ النَّاسِ. It's better than to leave them poor and dependent on others, where they would extend their hands to seek help and begging them. So that means the balance in our life. Don't be greedy and thinking that I need to leave the most of my wealth to my children. We hear all kinds of stories when people are billionaires and so on. They die and they leave so much wealth. What happened to this wealth? Maybe his wife would take this wealth and marry someone else, and another man would benefit from his own wealth. He didn't benefit from it. So the balance is that a person should not be greedy and thinking that I need to leave all of what I have to my children and so on, and at the same time not to be extravagant or not to give everything and leave our dependencies as in need and so on and so forth. To have the balance in one's life, especially when a person has wealth, and constantly to give for the sake of Allah, because when a person gives, that what stays. And that's the benefit basically of learning the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Such a beautiful meaning really for what stays with the person versus what goes away. Also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we talked about this verse also, that the people when they enter Jannah, when the believers they enter Jannah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all among the people of Jannah, and they are praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they mention this inheritance in there. And they would say, وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي صَدَقَنَا وَعْدَهُ وَأَوْرَثَنَا الْأَرْضَ نَتَبَوَّأُ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ حَيْثُ نَشَاءُ. They would say, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that was truthful in his promise. He promised them Jannah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises the believers Jannah. And they would say, نَتَبَوَّأُ وَأَوْرَثَنَا الْأَرْضَ. That means He gave us the inheritance of the earth, that we would take from the Jannah whatever we will. Imam Al-Tabari rahimahullah, in explanation of this verse, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the earth of Jannah, the Jannah basically, that was supposed to be for the people of the hellfire, if they would have obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya, He made the believers inherit it. So again, the people, those who will be in hellfire, they had a share in Jannah. There was a place for them in Jannah. Jannah is spacious enough for the entire humanity if they're obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for those who entered the hellfire, the message reached them, they did not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they end up being in the hellfire forever. So what happened to their place in Jannah that was prepared and ready for them? The people of Jannah, those who enter Jannah, would inherit it from them. And you can imagine the great sorrow and grief and sadness that the people of the hellfire would receive, and the great happiness for the people of Jannah. And this is what the verse is saying. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that when a person dies and he's in the grave, the disbelievers, they, after the questions are being given to them, Man Rabbuk, Ma Dinuk, Man Rajul Ladhi Bu'itha Fikum, who's your Lord, what's your religion, who's the man that was sent to you? The disbeliever or the hypocrite would say, Ha la adri, I do not know. So after basically failing this, and after they are receiving the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ said, and a gate will be opened for that person, the disbeliever, to Jannah. And he will be told that this was your position in Jannah if you would have believed and obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then it will be closed, and then a gate to the hellfire will be opened, and it will be said that this is your place in the Day of Judgment, and you will constantly receive the heat and the miseries and the evil things from the hellfire in his grave till the Day of Judgment. So you can again imagine the extreme sorrow that is even worse than the physical punishment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, but the matter is a very serious one. And that's what the Iman and the faith does to the hearts of the believers. It's based on these facts. If we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Warith, that means we need to then spend for the sake of Allah and keep for ourselves our wealth to stay forever, for us to inherit it in the day of resurrection, and to have the balance in our life with this. Also, one of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, that asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our strength when we are in need of it the most, when we reach olden age. One of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to say at the end of every majlis, every gathering, starts with Allahumma aqsim li min khashyatika ma tahulu bihi bayni wa bayna ma'asiyatik, and so on. And in it, ومتعني بسمعي وبصري وقوتي أبدا ما أبقيتني واجعله الوارث مني, which means give me the strength in my hearing and my sight and my strength, and make it the warith, make it what I inherit, what is inherited from me. What does that mean? That means keep me with my strength, keep these organs in my life, a dua, supplication, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep these means of strength in oneself till the moment of death, so that he doesn't lose any of it. So that when a person dies, as if he inherited this. That means his eyesight is still good, his hearing is still good, his strength is still good till the moment of death, so that he will enjoy this, not enjoying it as a way of just following one's desire, but rather to use it for the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we make salah, we stand and we make ruku' and we make sujood, that all needs physical strength. We need to listen to the Quran, we need to read the Quran, we need to enjoy the life of being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we need strength to be able to fulfill this, to make da'wah, to invite others to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to work, to earn, to give others. We talk about the virtues of giving for the sake of Allah. So when a person earns money, that needs strength, of course. So all of these great meanings and great means for a person to be obedient to Allah and to reach the high level of goodness, this all needs strength. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ would say such a dua. And there are many like this. So all of this brings again the beautiful meaning of the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Warith. He's the one that inheritor of all, and He subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that people should have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can then we benefit from this name? And we talked about some of these benefits. And this is the same with all of the names and attributes of Allah. First of all, to be patient when it comes to the truth, and to enjoin good and forbid evil, because everybody shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to panic and not to be terrified when there is so much falsehood and so much superiority of the falsehood and so on and so forth, there's no need for the person, for the Muslim to be terrified, but rather to have patience to be upon the truth. Many people, and they were upon the truth, and they were steadfast on the deen of Allah. But then when the ways of the evildoers and the falsehood became strong and popular and so on, these people, they felt, the people they were steadfast, they felt inferior, maybe ridiculed, looked at in a different way. They're called names. If they see you in the airports of a Muslim, whatever there is, they call you names, or they screen you, or whatever there is. So people start to compromise their religion. Why? Because they don't want to be in trouble. And what trouble that a Muslim do if he is upon the deen of Allah? Muslim is someone that people should be the safest when they are with him. A true Muslim, someone applies the deen of Allah, he's supposed to be, when people see him, to feel the safest state that they are in when they meet a Muslim. Because a Muslim, he has concern towards people. He follows the way of the Prophet ﷺ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him as a mercy to mankind. But this is the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on earth, that these types of things sometimes happens. So as a result of believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Warith, the inheritor of all, then there's no need to fear other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us, and everything shall return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The outcome, the believers would inherit all kinds of goodness if they are steadfast on the deen of Allah. Musa alayhi salam, he said this meaning to his people when he was faced with Fir'aun and the power of Fir'aun, and Fir'aun was threatening Musa alayhi salam and his people that he would cut their hands and their legs and take their wives and kill them and all of these types of things. Musa alayhi salam said to his people what? When they were weak and oppressed and they didn't have any physical means to protect themselves, Musa alayhi salam said to his people what? He said, قال موسى لقومه استعينوا بالله واصبروا إن الأرض لله يورثها من يشاء من عباده والعاقبة للمتقين. Musa alayhi salam said to his people, استعينوا بالله واصبروا. Seek help from Allah and be patient. Why? Because indeed this earth, lillah, this earth is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does not belong to Fir'aun, does not belong to the tyrants and the evildoers. It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يورثها, that's the verb of Al-Warith. يورثها. He inherited it to whoever he wills from his slaves. So he subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives whatever he wills to whoever he wills. And then وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, the outcome is for the muttaqeen. So be patient, because everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it keeps on going like this till وَتِلْكَ الْجَنَّةُ أُورِثْتُمُوهَا, as we heard. The Jannah, you have been given it, and you inherited it as a result of what you used to do. So this is a great benefit, and not to be like some of the people of Bani Israel when they said right after this, قالوا أُذِينَا مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ تَأْتِيَنَا وَمِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جِئْتَنَا. We've been harmed and things of that nature before you came to us and after you came to us. And Musa alayhi salam kept on convincing his people, but reminding them that everything is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-ard lillah, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It belongs, the earth belongs to Allah. And the outcome is for the believers. So if you are truly believing in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Warith, be patient to be upon the deen of Allah. Don't let people make you compromise your religion out of the fear of human beings, or for them to accept you, or for them to be pleased with you. Seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is Al-Warith, because He is the one that everything shall return to Him, and He is the inheritor of all. Also, one of the great benefits is to, and it's linked to patience, is to have this zeal and the not the excitement, but to have the zeal and the focus and the determination to do all kinds of good deeds in all subjects of good, especially spending for the sake of Allah, as we heard. Why? Because you have this strong belief that all of what you do in your life, you are basically sending it to the hereafter. That everything will be inherited to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's basically you're saving for yourself. You're saving for yourself what you would give for the sake of Allah. And as we heard in the ayah before, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the son of Adam would say, Mali, Mali, my wealth, my wealth. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that he has only three things out of his wealth. ما أكل فأفنى, what he eats and it goes away. Whatever we eat, it goes away. And أو لبس فأبلى, and what you wear and it becomes old. You remember the nice clothing that you bought and you were so happy that you received it and so on. What happened to it after years or whatever? Becomes old and you give it to someone else or ruined or whatever. Or he gives and that what stays with the person. أو تصدقت فأمضيت. Or what you give in charity and that's what stays with you. And other than that, as it's reported in the narration in Sahih Muslim, وَمَا سِوَ ذَلِكَ فَهُوَ ذَاهِبٌ وَتَارِكُهُ لِلنَّاسِ. And other than that, he is going to leave, and he's going to leave it to the people. So if you're really wise and you want to keep your wealth for yourself, even after you die, give from it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's all application to the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Al-Warith. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us certainty. When a person has the yaqeen, the certainty, the names and attributes of Allah, we would see the entire world differently. We will be enjoying the life on the face of earth to accumulate the good deeds, to have the righteousness, to give for the sake of Allah, and not to be panicking or terrified, but rather to have the enjoyment and the happiness in this life and hereafter. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts and make us among those who listen and obey and submit themselves to the orders of Allah. Till next time, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He protect you all. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Change your heart, Lord, change our heart. You're living in a lawful way. Be mindful of what you say. Be sincere when you pray. Today could be your last day. Bear each other no malice. Greed and faith can't coexist in the same